The first rule in investment is don't lose. And the second rule in investment is don't forget the first rule, and that's all the rules there are. I mean, if you buy things for far below what they're worth and you buy a group of them, you basically don't lose money.
Everything is falling. The market collapses, the headlines scream, people rush to cash out, sell, run away, and me, I only have $1,000. It is not a theoretical exercise, it's the reality that many people live. What if it were me, if I had lost everything and had to deal with a deep economic crisis with almost nothing? The answer may surprise. I wouldn't panic, I wouldn't turn on the television, I wouldn't look for advice in other people's despair, and above all, I would not confuse movement with progress, because I've learned over more than 7 decades that the moments when everything seems to fall apart, these are precisely the moments when the simplest principles become more valuable. With $1,000 in my pocket and a crisis outside, my biggest concern, it wouldn't be like earning more, he would be how not to lose clarity. Because the biggest collapse in times of crisis is not the market collapse, it is the collapse of the mind. What do you do when you have almost nothing? It's what defines what you will become when you have a lot. And I guarantee you, the first lesson in facing a crisis with little money is not to act like someone who has already lost everything, because you still have some, and that something, if protected intelligently, could be the beginning of everything. When everything comes crashing down around you, the first thing you need to protect, it's not your money and your head. I learned that in times of crisis, the investor's biggest enemy. It's not the market and the reaction to the market itself. It's not the stock market crash that destroys fortunes. It's the panic that comes soon after. People sell at the bottom, buy at the top, follow rumors, fall into emotional traps, and they don't do it because they're stupid. But why they are human, I'm no different. I feel fear, I feel doubt. But the difference is that I don't act on those feelings. I let them pass like a storm, and I only make decisions after the ground is firm again, even if it's just within me. If you have little money and are experiencing a crisis, listen to this. Your emotional decisions will cost you more than the crisis itself. It's easy to appear rational when everything is going well, but the crisis it reveals who really has convictions and who is just surfing the tide. The crisis offers you a choice. Or do you panic along with the crowd? Or do you position yourself as a strategic observer who understands that chaos is temporary, but bad decisions can be permanent? I never made money by following other people's fears. I won when I was able to think clearly while the rest of the world trembled. Before thinking about investing, before looking for any opportunity, I would take care of what it's already mine. Because with little money in the midst of a crisis, your first objective is not to grow and not be deleted. I've always said, you only find out who is swimming naked when the tide goes out. And in a crisis, the tide always goes out. If I only had $1,000 and the world was falling apart, my first action would be simple. Protect my battlefield. Cut all unnecessary expenses. Redefine what is essential. Ensure liquidity to at least survive the next few months. There is no true courage without survival, and no one builds a castle while the foundation is sinking. I would treat my home like a business. It would reduce costs, control every penny, maintain reserves, not out of fear but out of strategy, because that's when most people lose. Not for lack of intelligence, but for ignoring a simple truth. If you are financially fragile, any mistake becomes a fatal blow. And protecting my battlefield goes beyond money. It also means taking care of my mind, my energy, my time. Avoid excess information, conflicting opinions, promises of quick profits. A crisis requires absolute focus, and focus starts with internal order. If you have little capital, the crisis may seem like the end. But if you protect what matters, she might just be the beginning of a new way of thinking. After protecting my battlefield, I would do something that almost no one does in a crisis. I would silence the world, because true chaos, it's not out there. It's in the excess of voices you let in. Everyone has an opinion. Everyone has a chart. Everyone has an apocalyptic prediction or a financial miracle about to happen. But the truth is simple. None of these voices will bear the consequences of their decisions. Only you will. So I would turn off the headlines. It would close the 5-minute charts. And I would put my attention where it really matters, in the fundamentals, in the principles, in reality. I learned that the more noise there is, the more valuable silence becomes. Not the silence of passivity, but the silence of clarity. The crisis puts everyone in a state of urgency, but I don't follow the crowd clock. I follow my own beat, built over decades. And this measure only works well when the noise is removed. If I had little money and was in the middle of a crisis, I wouldn't waste energy trying to understand what the world is going to do tomorrow. I would spend energy staying calm enough to take a single good decision. One decision can change everything, but you will never see this decision if you are surrounded by noise. So before taking action, I would listen to what matters most, what doesn't change, even when everything changes. And for that, I need silence. If I had little money in a crisis, every decision I made, he would have to be millimetrically intelligent, because with limited resources, the room for error is zero. This means that I couldn't afford to be impulsive, neither to follow fads nor to bet and see. I would use what little I have like it was all I had in the world, because that's what he would be. And therefore, before any investment, I would ask myself some simple but non-negotiable questions. Do I deeply understand what I'm investing in? If I had to keep this up for 10 years, would it still be worth it? Is there a real margin of safety, or am I hoping it works out? Most people who lose money in crises do not lose because of bad luck. Lose for acting as if you have room to make mistakes when you don't. If I had $1,000, I would look for assets, simple, resilient, predictable. Businesses with clear fundamental, companies that continue operating even in winter, ideas that I can explain to a child. What if I didn't find anything like that? I would wait, because patience in these moments, it's worth more than the rush. Many try to compensate for a lack of capital with excess risk, but this exchange rarely ends well. With little money, your best weapon is not boldness, it's lucidity. It is the ability to do few choices, but right choice. One of the biggest lessons I learned in life is this: crises don't destroy value, they hide it. When the market panics, people sell the good things they have, along with the bad things they have. They throw everything out the window, without distinction. And that's when they appear the real discounts. Real opportunities camouflaged as problems. Most see fear, I see price. But be careful, not everything that drops in price is cheap. And not everything that shines in good times deserves to be saved in the storm. Therefore, I would only buy something if I could answer calmly, will this business continue to exist in 10 years? Does it generate cash? Do you have loyal customers? Do you have a model that stands up to reality? Is it falling in value or just in price? The best purchases of my life happened when no one wanted to buy, not because I was braver, but because I was more disciplined. See, the crisis, it's an emotional settlement, and those with trained eyes and a steady mind can see what is actually on sale. But only those who survive the first phase of the crisis with lucidity has the capital, serenity, and clarity to reap these fruits. What if I had little money? Maybe I couldn't buy much, but a good choice at a good price and a good deal, it could be the start of everything. And the crisis, which seemed like the end, may turn out to be the chance that no one had the courage to take. Even in the middle of the crisis, even with little money, time would still be my greatest ally. See, the weather doesn't change just because the world is in a panic. The principles remain the same. Compound interest continues to work. Solid businesses continue to generate value, even if silently. That's why, even in the midst of chaos, I would maintain my long-term perspective. Because it's easy to forget that when everything is falling apart, the temptation is to act as if tomorrow is the end. But the big results, they never belong to those who think about the end. They belong to those who build with decades in mind, not days. If I had $1,000 and the world was collapsing, I would remember something I always believed: you don't need to rush when you are playing an infinite game. Time, when combined with discipline, it is the most powerful force in the financial universe. The shares I bought decades ago, the ones that nobody wanted, that seemed slow, these were precisely the ones that multiplied the most. Not for a trick, but why I gave it time. And if today you have little, you are insecure, surrounded by fear. Know this. You still have the most valuable asset of all, the years ahead of you. Use them wisely. Invest like someone who wants to prosper 20 years from now, and not like someone who is desperate for profit in 20 days. The crisis will pass, but whatever you do with your time now, it will accompany you for a long, long time. When everything changes, if there's one thing I've learned over time, is that storms pass, but principles remain. The crisis changes the scenario. Change prices, change moods, change headlines. But it doesn't change what works. And that's why my philosophy stays exactly the same. Even when the world seems to be on fire, with little money, in the midst of chaos, I wouldn't go running after new ideas, new gurus, new formulas. I would go back to basics. Safety margin, business I understand, competent and honest management, patience, real value above momentary price. Do you know why these principles work in bullish, bearish, euphoric, and panic markets? They are like a compass. And when you're lost, no need for more speed, needs direction. This is where most people go wrong. Everything changes when everything changes. But changing your philosophy in the middle of a crisis, it's like changing the wings of a plane mid-flight. If you have built your beliefs on foundations, keep them. It doesn't matter what the market is screaming. I didn't get rich by coming up with new ideas every week. I became rich because repeating right ideas for decades. And if I had to start over today, in the midst of chaos, I would repeat the same ideas as always. Because while the world runs in circles, wisdom walks in a straight line. Are you scared now? The market fell, fear took over, and it seems like the world is about to end. I understand. But let me tell you something. This is not my first crisis. I saw the stock market plummet more than 20% in a single day in 1987. I saw solid companies evaporate in the dot-com bubble of the early 2000s. I saw the entire banking system shake in 2008. I saw the world come to a standstill in 2020 with a pandemic that no one expected. And even before that, I began my financial journey in 1942 during World War II. Can you imagine this? Buying stocks while the whole world was at war, while no one knew if there would be a tomorrow. Well, that's exactly what I did. I took my first $14.75 and bought 3 shares of an energy company. No certainty, no protection, no manual. And do you know what I learned from all of this? Crises come and go, but whoever keeps their head on straight, he almost always ends up in a better position than he was in before the crash. Not because he predicted recovery, but why he refused to give up when it was easier to give in to fear. When you live long enough, realize that the world doesn't end, it just changes. And those who are willing to learn from change thrive in it. So if you think this is the worst crisis ever, know that this phrase was said in practically all previous crises. But what comes next usually rewards those who remain calm, lucid, and committed to the right principles. People ask me all the time, Warren, what do you think will happen? Will the market fall further? How long will this crisis last? And my answer is always the same. I don't even need to know, because the truth is, those who try to predict the future always react, but those who prepare live building. I don't stay up trying to guess the next market move. I spend my days making sure that when the future arrives, I will be in a position to respond with clarity and not with panic. When you have little money in a crisis, the worst mistake is believing that you need to predict the next curve to protect yourself. You need to build such a solid foundation that no matter what happens, you continue standing. And do you know how this is done? With simple decisions based on logic, not headlines, with choices that make sense today, tomorrow, and in 10 years, with habits that don't depend on the market's mood. If you're always trying to guess the future, you live tense, anxious, vulnerable. But if you build on what doesn't change, you go through what changes without losing your way. I never knew what the market would do the next month, and yet I built a fortune because my strategy, you don't need the prediction, it needs the preparation. So when you think about security, remember, it's not knowing what's ahead, it's about being ready for whatever comes, whatever it may be. If I could sit in front of a panicked young investor right now, someone who is watching their little reserve melt, who feels like he wasted time, money, and hope, I would say the following: calm, breathe, and listen. You are not alone, and most importantly, this is not the end. You may feel like you made unforgivable mistakes, who came in at the wrong time, that missed the timing. But the truth is, you just gained a lesson that is worth more than any action in the short term. Why no one becomes a good investor without going through it. You need to feel the fear, the discomfort, the doubt, and even so, learn to think clearly. This is the real school, and you're in it now, so don't compare yourself to those who seem to be winning. Don't follow advice from those who have never lost, and above all, don't give up just because the world seems hard. If I had met you in the 70s, I would show you double-digit inflation. If it were in the 80s, it would show you sudden breakdowns. If it were in 2008, I would show you the pure fear on the faces of billionaire investors. And in all these moments, I continued, not because I'm made of steel, but because I understood that the game is long, and the game only rewards those who stay. So if today you have little and you feel like everything is falling apart, I give you simple advice. Stop thinking about redeeming money. Start thinking about rescuing your mindset. Because what will make you rich, it is not a specific asset, it's the way you think about assets when everyone is losing their mind. And if you learn this now, this crisis may have been the best teacher of your life. The truth is simple, and a lot of people don't want to hear it. But I'll say it anyway. Some of the greatest fortunes in history began in the midst of a crisis. Not because these people were lucky, but because instead of running away, they stayed. Instead of panicking, they observed. Instead of reacting, they thought. And when the storm passed, they were positioned, ready, strengthened. Of course, this takes courage, but more than courage, this requires conviction. And conviction only comes when you anchor yourself in something stronger than fear. I myself bought stocks as the financial system fell apart in 2008, not because I was sure what would happen, but because he knew what he was doing. Did you know the real value? It doesn't disappear, it just changes hands. And generally it comes out of the hands of those who act with desperation and goes into the hands of those who act with conscience. If you are in crisis today, personal, financial, or emotional, I want you to keep this. This could be your chance, your opportunity to learn more about yourself than any book could teach you, to build resilience, to develop habits that will accompany you when things improve, because they go to improve. And when they get better, you will look back and be proud of having made it through this period, not as a victim, but as someone who used the crisis to grow. Great stories don't start with comfort, they begin with challenge. And you are living yours now. The question is, what are you going to build with it? You don't need certainty to win. You need clarity, discipline, and time. The crisis will pass, but the way you decide to cross it, it will echo for years in your financial life and perhaps even far beyond. If these words resonated with you, if in some way they gave you more focus, calmer, or more direction. So this is just the beginning here at Echoes of Wealth. We don't look for shortcuts. We build vision. We honor principles that stand the test of time and plant the seeds that can resonate for generations. If you want to walk with someone who thinks about the long term, with those who learn from the great names in history, not just what they did, but how they thought. Because true prosperity, it doesn't make noise.